Hello and welcome to this month's video. It's Greg Gunther here from the Podiatry Hive, and in this particular video I want to talk a little bit about a thing called the 8th habit. Stephen Covey is the acclaimed author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and it's one of the most influential writings that has existed. And if you haven't read it already, I'd encourage you to actually grab the book and read all the way through it. They're really influential and quite inspirational. Stephen Covey has been a great influence to me over the years, and starting with the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But one of his more recent works has been a thing called the 8th habit, and it's as influential in my mind as the 7 habits. The 8th habit actually talks a lot about and builds on the 7 habits, and largely what it's looking at is looking at ourselves initially and trying to dig back within ourselves and find our voice is what he talks about. So what I want to do in this particular video is to actually walk you through some of that and give you some of the framework, and hopefully it helps you give some insights as to how you can start to think about yourself, and more importantly, how can we actually use that to help others in our lives. So the 8th habit, Stephen Covey, really influential guy, and one of the things that he said was that, and I'll read this because it's quite important, there is no way you can make significant progress in your relationship with others if your own is in a mess, or if you're untrustworthy. Really key points. That's why, to improve any relationship, you must start with yourself. You must improve yourself. So this is all about really searching and looking within ourselves and just finding what some of our own strengths are, and so perhaps even in doing so, finding out where maybe we've got a few weaknesses. It's a really powerful way to look at others. So the 8th habit really just says find your voice and inspire others to find theirs. So it's about finding out who we are, what's our voice, and how can we then use that to inspire others to help them find theirs. And the world would be a much better place if we could all achieve that. So the first part, of course, in terms of doing that is how do we do it. So finding your voice is the first thing, and then inspiring others. There's 2 really steps to this, if you like. Finding our own voice first, but then once we've done that, inspiring others to find theirs. So if we look first of all at finding our voice, it's really a question of discovering our voice and then expressing our voice. So if we first of all think about, well, in terms of discovering our own voice, what it means is to engage in work that actually taps into our own talents, our strengths, if you like, and actually fuels our passion. I unfortunately see a lot of people through life and in their work who just really are through the day-to-day grind. And one of the things that I truly believe is that we all actually do have talents. Every single person, I have the very firm belief, has talents. Unfortunately, a lot of us, though, don't get to discover exactly what those are. And second part of that, of course, is we don't necessarily get to use them. There's so much I find in life, people who are just really not necessarily tapping in and utilizing their talents really effectively. And of course, passion, if you actually break the word down, is pass I on, and it's really then taking our talents and then passing those talents on to others. There's 4 elements human nature. Stephen Covey talks about the 4 elements of human nature, and this is quite well read. It's quite well researched. We have our body, we have our heart, we have our mind, and we have our spirit. So there's really those 4 elements. But if we look at each of those in turn, what we really need to do is to look at more closely what it actually means. So in terms of body, to try and tap in and discover, and this is about finding our voice still, if we imagine that we had a heart attack, and live accordingly. So if you actually were in a position where you'd had a heart attack, what would that mean, and how would you think that, or how would you actually live your life from that point on? From a heart, imagine you only had a half-life of only 2 years, so we only had 2 years to go. Live our lives accordingly. In our minds, imagine if everything we say about another they can hear. Now live accordingly. How powerful is that? If we actually say things that people will hear, then that's going to curb a lot of things like gossip, for example, which I detest. Spirit. Imagine you had a visit from the Almighty every 3 months. how would that be, and live according to that. So body, heart, mind and soul really is about living our lives according to our truth around those things. So that's the 4 elements. So that's really, in Stephen Covey's language, the whole person, and really the 8th habit is about dealing with the whole person. So we have the components of body, heart, mind and soul, or spirit, and then we have our basic needs, which is to live, learn, love and leave a legacy. It's the 4 L's, and we all actually really should aspire to fulfilling these basic needs, and once we actually do that, we're living more of a whole life. The key attributes, though, to actually achieving those things are things like discipline, vision, passion and conscience. So we need to actually embody these key attributes in order for us to meet the basic needs, and in turn utilize all the components of our body, of our soul. So that's the whole person paradigm that Steve Covey talks about in the 8th habit. So our voice really then becomes our unique significance that we have when we look at all of those 4 elements: our passion, our conscience, our talent and our need, and it embodies all of those things when we can find the meeting of all of those things together. So that's what we find when we bring them all together as one. So when you can give yourself to the work that brings together your need, your talent and your passion, power effectively will be unlocked. So then we need to express our voice. It's all very well to find our voice, and it's one of the things that Covey says is very famous for is to have knowledge and not act on that knowledge is the same as having no knowledge at all. So really what we need to do is learn to express our voice, and in order to do that we need to take the 4 dimensions, those key attributes, and actually build on those. So the power of the mind is about vision. Vision's the ability to manage what's possible in not just people, but it's in anything, in an organization. One of the things I get really passionate about is looking towards the future about particular organizations that are doing really quite meaningful work, and what can actually be created through doing that. I get really excited by that. The Podiatry Hive is one of those examples where I believe we can really make quite a difference in the world of podiatry, and that's not just in a particular area. I think it's something that's global, and it's a need. Podiatry has a very important place to play in people's lives. So when we can make the connection between that need and the possibility, that's when we're actually creating a vision, and that's when it gets really exciting. The power of the body is really then about discipline, and something that we as human beings are perhaps not so good at. But if we can bring a vision into reality, that's all then about discipline. It's dealing with the hard facts. It's not necessarily plain sailing all the way through this. It's often a case where we have a few hard and high hurdles to jump over, but the discipline and the connection with our vision will actually drive us towards that and keep us going. Passion is then about what actually fires us. What are the things that really get me going, and I feel like time is just slipping by me, and something in the athletic world or in sports that's commonly called flow. It's when is it that I'm in flow and time just seems to pass by, and that's often when we're actually utilizing our passion. And then the last thing is about spirit, and this is not necessarily in any particular religious sense as such, but it's really about understanding for ourselves, what is right, and what's our drive towards leaving something that's meaningful, a legacy that's actually meaningful, and that tends to guide us then towards our passion, our discipline, and our vision. It's really something that it shapes the contribution that we want to make in the world. So finding a voice in each of those dimensions is then about how do we actually express that voice. So for example, in the power of the mind and our vision, what need do I sense in my family, my community, or in perhaps the organization that I work for? What talent do I possess, which can properly be disciplined and applied that would keep to that particular need? Does the opportunity to meet that need tap into the things that I feel most passionate about? And does my conscience allow me to take action in this way and become intensely involved? So again, just trying to understand from our perspectives, what's our need, what talent do I have to actually help me towards achieving that need, or linking with that need. Am I actually passionate about that, and is it aligned with my conscience? And if you can align all of those things, effectively you've got a very, very powerful position that you find yourself in, and you will feel yourself wanting to express your voice around those things. So the other part of this then is, once we've actually discovered ourselves, how do we actually then inspire others to find theirs? And this is really where it gets fun. So it's really then, it's about two things. It's about focus and it's about execution. And they're both equally important with one another. In terms of focus, we need to expand our influence. We need to be trustworthy. We need to be able to build trust. And we need to be able to blend the other's voice. And we need to also create a common vision, alignment, if you like, around these things. So in terms of expanding our influence, it's really about taking the initiative and acting. In an organizational sense, it's acting for the organization. So we need to strive for excellence, for example. We only need to do what's right. We need to avoid complaining, criticizing, and actually being negative. How often do we see that in the workplace? We just, the grapevine, the collusion, the gossip that's going on in an organization, it's so undermining and sabotaging the ultimate play that we're trying to achieve. We need to learn to be able to empathize, and we need to be constant. We need to actually remain true to what's going on and be consistent with that. We need to be trustworthy. We need to have personal integrity. It's a common saying that I use is, and you see it a lot with leaders or managers, if you like. I probably more prefer to call them, where it's almost a question of doing as I say, not as I do. Where there's two different sort of paradigms at play there. So, people actually watch what you do. They don't necessarily listen to what you say. So we need to have personal integrity around that. If we want to be trustworthy, we need to actually have people, our behaviours need to actually align with that, so with what we're saying. So we need to have maturity. We need to have an abundance mentality. It's really important that we don't live our lives in scarcity, because if we're living our lives in scarcity, it's just this constant fear that surrounds us, and people get to feel that. They can see the way that we're actually behaving around this fear, and it drives us away from things. So we need to live in an abundance, that we have already what we need to do whatever we want. There's technical competence, and one of the things around technical competence for mine is surround ourselves with people. If I don't have the technical competence myself, then have the humility that you can actually then ask people for help when you need to. Conceptual knowledge is really about, we may not necessarily know the how at this point, but it's this belief that and drive that we know what could be. So it's being able to come up with the concepts and then surrounding ourselves with people who can help us take those things forward. And it's having that sort of constant awareness. In terms of that's about being trustworthy, but in terms of building trust, it's then about creating that mutual understanding. So it's being able to get people to come with you on the actual journey. And it's having that sort of openness and courtesy that we respect people around us. Win-win is a big one for me. I see so often that in dealings that people have at whatever level, this can happen on a day-to-day basis, where you end up with this win-lose or lose-win, where one party's actually losing out. And whilst that might actually solve an issue at that moment in time, it's not a sustainable, long-term, viable sort of option. So it's got to be win-win or no deal at all. And that's one of my big principles that I live by in my day-to-day life. So always search for the win-win. Clarify the expectations clearly. I think a lot of times when we say stuff, it's not necessarily received in the same way. And one of the things that I like to have people practice or learn to practice is to actually have people express back to you what it is that they've heard, so you can get that clarity around that. Always be loyal, even to those that are absent. How often is it that somebody's not around and all of a sudden that person becomes the topic of discussion? So we need to actually be loyal. If we're going to work in a team and we want to have trust, then people need to understand that even if they're not there, they're still going to be respected, and we appreciate and acknowledge them. So there's a couple of other things there. Be prepared to accept apologies from others. I think that's important. Sometimes we harbour stuff, we hang on to things, we don't let go. An apology is an apology. You can't undo what's done, but hopefully people have learned from that particular experience and they've got some genuine remorse around that. So we should learn to accept that. Be prepared to give also and receive genuine feedback. It's a funny thing about human beings. Sometimes when people are actually giving us some feedback, whether it's positive or negative, we tend to put up a little bit of a barrier, and we shouldn't do that. I don't actually believe in criticism. I think there's only ever, if it's given with the right intent, it's only ever constructive feedback. So if it's done in the intent that we're trying to help somebody, then I don't see that as criticism. It's actually somebody actually genuinely trying to help me, and it's good feedback for me to help. And be forgiving. Like how often do we just hang on to things and we don't forgive? It's really something that becomes an anchor, if you like, to hold us back. In terms of blending out of this voice, it's the best way to resolve conflicts is the third alternative. And what the third alternative really is talking about is actually getting everybody's points of view. So if you just had a group of two, for example, and you're talking around a particular issue, it might actually be a problem that you're trying to solve. It's really each person putting their thoughts out, if you like, into the middle on the table, without necessarily being totally attached to a solution that you might actually feel that you've got. And we often come to these discussions thinking that we may have a solution, indeed. But what happens in a third alternative is, in this case, two people talking and throwing their views, their thoughts out onto the table. Invariably what can happen, and I've seen this happen really well, where once you've actually put that all together in a melting pot, so to speak, you end up coming up with this thing called the third alternative, which is actually a blend often of the two. Or it might actually be something quite out of the box. Just because the two minds have come together, you may well actually come up with something that's quite different. It's a really powerful technique, and what it does is engage everybody in the process, and that's a really good way to help get people's buy-in. So the third alternative is very good. So the way to actually develop the third alternative is to search for another alternative solution. So you need to come to these sorts of discussions with an open mind around that there could well be a better solution out there. And it was my dad who always said to me, there is always a better way. And I just remember as a kid him repeating that to me often, that there's always a better way. We just need to search for that. And then one simple rule, and I've already stated this just a moment ago, it's that nobody actually gets to make his or her point until they've restated the other person's point. So this is actually a technique that's used commonly in mediation, where the one person just gets to speak and then the baton, if you like, passes across to the other person. It was actually an Indian technique that was often called the message stick, where the message stick got passed to the next person, but the person with the stick was the only person allowed to talk. It was, let's say, a very common technique used in mediation, and a very powerful one. And then we need to create a common vision. This is something I call alignment. And basically the four realities that we tend to all grapple with in an organization is, the realities of the market. And sometimes we live our lives in a little bit of denial around some of these things. We perhaps have an intuition that something is happening or going on, but it might not be so favorable towards us, so we take the view that, okay, we'll turn a blind eye to that, or we'll keep our head in the sand. Unfortunately, we have to face up to brutal realities often in case. Core competencies is important. A lot of organisations, we all have these, but they're perhaps not well understood. And often when we have a misalignment around these things, you can have a lot of different things showing up. It can show up in people's behaviours. It can show up in perhaps the way that we interface with stakeholders, whether they're our customers, suppliers, even our own employees. So organisations that have a good understanding of their core competencies and actually have everybody aligned around those core competencies is an organisation that's actually in sync. So it's a good exercise to do to understand just what are those things. And what are our stakeholder wants and needs? Now, stakeholders are all of the people that we have an interaction with. So it's our employees, it is our suppliers, it's definitely our customers, very important stakeholder. It can also be and is who the owners of the business as well. So getting a common vision around all of those things, and some of those things, there can be some tension around those sorts of things with their stakeholders, but it's really understanding, okay, how can we go and find that win-win? That's what we're looking for in all of that, getting alignment around all of those things. The organisation's value system and sense of purpose. These can actually often relate to our core competencies, because our core competencies tend to actually, if you like, develop or evolve out of our values and out of our sense of purpose. So again, having a really good understanding of those things is really important and very powerful in terms of making sure that we attract the right sort of people to go on our journey with us in our organisation. So how do you achieve shared visions and values across our entire organisation? Well, the first thing we need to do, and we've talked a lot about this already in the Podiatry Hive, where it's really about understanding our why. Simon Sinek is a very good proponent of this. You can have a look at a lot of his material on YouTube. There's a lot of good YouTube clips, and he's got a couple of really good books out also called Finding Your Why. More recent one that he's written, which is very good as well, is about why leaders eat last. So the why is really about understanding our mission, our vision, and our values. The how then is about creating an overall strategic plan. This is giving the direction, if you like, to our organisation. And then the last thing is really about the what. It's about understanding our core competencies, having a passionate focus around delivering on all of these things, and of course it's about the execution, which is something that we unfortunately tend to be not so good at, which is where we need to think about how do we actually execute. So in terms of execution, what it really means is aligning all of our goals with our systems, and it's also empowering others to actually take this on and help take it forward, implement, if you like. So aligning goals and systems, we need to actually have our information systems matching with our organizational value systems. It's really nice to actually have everything, all of our management information, for example, all of our processes, all aligned around these sort of things. We need to also have a compensation system, which is creating that cooperation, the synergy to help encourage everybody to drive forward and implement or take our vision and what it is that we're trying to achieve in our strategic direction, take it all forward and put the rubber on the road. We need to stay flexible. One of the things that one of the things that gets in the way often of progress is this. There's two things really here that Dan Sullivan talks a lot about, which is perfection and procrastination. They're the two real evils of progress. And one of the things that stops us from doing that, particularly with perfection, is that we want something to be perfect before we'll actually do anything about that. But the problem with that, of course, is nothing's ever perfect. We will actually get something to what we think we wanted to get to, and then that discovery, what we'll find is, there's something else that we need to tweak. So we'll need to do that before we actually do something about that. And unfortunately, that just keeps pushing the horizon further forward. You just never ever actually reach it. And so really what we need to have is this open mind. One of the rules that I like in life is something called the 80%. If something is at 80% of readiness to take forward, whatever that might be. It might be a strategy, it might be a particular thing that we're trying to do. If it's at 80%, it's a good enough to actually take it forward. The other 20% comes from the learning that we get from when we implement. So we need to stay flexible with our systems enough that what we learn in that other 20% we can actually fine tune and tweak along the way. So it's this continual learning process. We need to be a learning organisation around that and be flexible enough that we can actually adjust as we need to. look at the world-class performers. What are they actually doing? We don't have to actually reinvent wheels all the time. There are people out there who are doing this and doing it well. So what can we learn from them and set up our feedback system so that, you know, as that's coming back in, we get to actually do something with the information that we're learning along the way. Empowering others, it's really about win-win, as I've talked about a lot. We need to actually have a self-evaluation where we get honest with ourselves and understand, you know, how well is it that we're actually doing that. And the other thing here of servant leaders, we're not good servants. We tend to actually want to be the other way around. So we need to be servant leaders where basically we are there to actually serve. We are there to serve. So we've got something that we want to achieve. We need to serve in terms of actually achieving that. So we need to have the humility, have the drive and the passion to actually take that forward and be prepared to serve. So the key to learning the 8th habit is this whole person paradigm. It's no one particular thing. So as I said, this builds on the 7 habits of highly effective people. This is really the 8th habit that brings all of this together. So we need to actually achieve our potential through having respect around the 4 elements of ourselves. That is our body, our mind, our heart, and our spirit, or our soul, as I often call it. If we want to get the best out of the people that we work with, we have to respect them as whole people and honor each aspect of them. So it's actually through that process that we find our own authentic voice, and we can inspire others to find theirs, as it does to bring out the leader in each and every one of us. That should be something that drives. One of the biggest buzzes that I have found in my working career and working with and through others has been seeing the growth in them and along their journey. So it's helping them actually find their strengths, and how is it that we can actually help them express their voice through the process. So that's the 8th habit. I hope you've enjoyed this particular video. Stephen Covey has written that in a book. There's a lot more to it than just what I've taken through in this video, but it's a really, really good read, and I'd encourage you and employ you to actually pick up this framework and use it for yourself, and you'll find that you'll live a much more fulfilling life, and it'll be much more rewarding for you. And I can vouch for the level of stress starting to diminish in your life as a result. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to sharing more of Stephen Covey and others as we produce more of these videos going forward.